Greetings, Psychonauts, and welcome back after a short break to the summer house, or the shed talk. I've not done one of these in a while because obviously I've moved house and I've had to come back to my parents to do this, but yeah, my new house doesn't have a very aesthetically pleasing shed to dissect reality, and so I thought definitely come back here and make this a regular thing. So, right, let's just get straight into it. Telepathy on psychedelics, is it real? So, interestingly, let's ask quite a thought-provoking question. What is real? According to Google, the definition of real is actually existing as a thing or occurring in fact, not imagined or supposed. 2, of a thing, not imitation or artificial, genuine. So, telepathy. Pretty metaphysical quality of the psychedelic experience, and I mean, if you do a lot of research into the CIA, the Russians, the remote viewing, all the trippy shit they were getting up to in the Cold War, I'll link a great video by Red Panda Koala and Jesse Michaels on telepathy and the CIA's efforts to sort of utilize this ethereal ability of the mind, because I bet a lot of people watching this won't believe it, like, telepathy, it's all bogus, it's just something you see in a movie, and then the other half of the people watching it, or a fraction, will be rather interested in what I have to say regarding its legitimacy, because I bet you've actually experienced this yourself on psychedelics, because it's definitely possible. Whether it's real or imaginary, that's a whole different story. The line between reality and imagination blurs the higher you go into elevated states of consciousness that can be induced by psychedelics, but not just with psychedelics. Sometimes I think people get a bit lost on, but it's all just chemicals, it's all chemicals, so it must be based in materialism, etc. Like, well, yeah, I get that, but it's very clear to me, if you do your research into telepathy, the history of telepathy and examples of people using it. Very famous Soviet woman, Ninel something or other. It'll be in the description. Go and watch Red Panda Koala's video. It's excellent. Actually, that was like, I think that was telekinesis. Actually, there's a anything that has telly at the beginning of it is pretty trippy. So this woman had like telekinetic abilities, and then the CIA and the Russians investigated telepathy and telekinesis and all this other like batshit crazy stuff. If you know about MK Ultra and remote viewing and all that stuff, then this is not news to you. But if you don't know about that, definitely research it. There's loads of good YouTube videos, especially the ones I've linked down below. So, have I experienced telepathy? And anyone who's quite a big Vivec consumer will know that yes, I have experienced telepathy. When I had my first ego death / breakthrough, piercing the veil of the material into the ephemeral, or the ethereal, even the metaphysical, basically breaking the boundaries of like the distinction between myself and other, classic ego deaths. So me and my mate were at this party, we were both on LSD, we smoked cannabis on the peak, and we realised after a while that we weren't actually talking with our mouths, we were talking with our minds, and we were just sat there, and we were just we weren't even looking at each other, we were just sat there in the room basking in consciousness, and realised we started communicating with each other. The communication was so unbelievably crystal clear and conscious, and cut through all the bullshittery of human dialogue that we deal with, being these egos and having these separate selves. It was the purest dialogue I've ever had, because then the trippy part about it was it became a monologue, because me and my mate started to recognize that we were actually talking to ourselves. And this is when mine and his chaotic, I don't think he had a full-on ego death, but he was on the verge, and then he was like, I need to get out of here, quite understandably, because it was the first time either of us had ever broken the matrix or whatever. It was the first time I'd ever entered sort of God mode, and I entered into the debug console of reality and started like no clipping, because I saw like the room I was in was just like one a singular point in an infinite potential ocean of realities. And every time I looked at someone, I just saw myself in them filtered. So I saw consciousness filtered through a different, separate conduit, if you want to call it that. So obviously this freaked me the fuck out. I started going crazy. I pissed my pants. I was threatening to kill myself because I was like, I thought there was no distinction between what I was experiencing now and death itself. Thankfully, didn't end up doing that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here doing this video. So. Interestingly, there was quite a bizarre parallel between mine and my friend's experience, because a few months before that, my very good mate who I've referred to numerous times, who's very much on the sort of like the awakening vibe. I don't take this stuff too like seriously and start going like, oh my god, I'm awake and you're not awake and you're like sheeple and blah 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 and you're asleep and I'm awake, blah blah, whatever. But just, if we want to call it like a technical term, like we awoke from the dream of being a human, of being finite. But it actually happened to him first, where him and another mate of ours, I had a party. It was quite insane. It got out of hand pretty fast, and I believe it was the first time they'd ever taken psychedelics. Or taken like such a high dose of psychedelics, or even just had like a psychedelic experience that intense. Also, yes, that is Faye Valentine on my hoodie, in case you were wondering, fellow weeaboos. So my mate, who I commune with almost telepathically every single time we're on psychedelics, in quite a subtle way, because we're always constantly chopping up and dissecting consciousness and analysing it using, I've got an abstract mind, he's got a bit more of a rational mind, and we both have this symbiotic relationship of how we deconstruct reality and try to get further towards the truth, even though the truth is infinite. So it's always constantly like teasing us. We're always on the precipice of more understanding, but we realise understanding is infinite. God, I love my tangents, and I hope you do as well, because if you don't, you've definitely unsubscribed a long time ago. So he went super crazy because him and the other lad basically had like a mutual sort of soul shift, if you want to call it. There's so many ways to describe what was going on. They had a mutual ego dissolution. The souls like exchanged energy. They became somewhat one mind. They accessed collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Basically, they merged and they like looked at each other. This is me like explaining the story from my own perspective and his explanation. So there might be a few details that I haven't described accurately, but the gist of it is that they both recognise the self in each other. They recognised the self with a capital S, the grand self. So they started communicating telepathically, and obviously their whole lives leading up to that point had never been that surreal and dreamlike and sort of, it was like they went out of bounds in the game world. Again, like the video game analogy, they went out of bounds, out of the map, and then it's like, whoa, oh shit, my idea of the game and the construction and the reality started to dissipate. So obviously that sent both of them crazy, and the loads of stuff. Yeah, I've talked about this before, and I'll link this again down here, the house party from hell. That's another great video of mine, a classic one, where I talk about the events that went down at that party. But what was interesting in the meta-narrative of like mine and my friends who are into psychedelics and spirituality quite deeply, is that the two experiences of those two had a direct parallel between me and my other mate, and we're all mates anyway, we all know each other, and we had like almost the exact same experience at another party on psychedelics when and like the trajectory of our lives up to that point was just like, oh, I guess we just take psychedelics and it makes us a bit more intelligent and knowledgeable, and it's mainly just about fun. But then you keep taking them, you become more conscious, and it's just shaving away, cheese grating away the ego so subtly each time. You won't notice it until one day, one of your psychedelic experiences will be a breakthrough, and it's bound to happen if you keep going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. And oftentimes, your first time breaking through, piercing the veil of the illusion of material reality, can be quite traumatizing, and it definitely traumatized, I think, all of us, and even physically, we were injured. My mate who I have this symbiotic relationship with, he was literally like physically injured from it because he just went into like super insanity mode because I guess he got a glimpse of the insane levels of infinity on top of actually experiencing telepathy. So to rewind all the way back to the video, is telepathy real? What's real? Like that's why I put real in quotations in the title, because real and imaginary, the line between this blurs. Like, you realize when you get so conscious that consciousness is so unlimited that it can literally imagine reality. It can imagine me touching a table, wearing clothes, a camera. The distinction is literally, in the normal human state of mind, is almost impossible to discern. And that's why when you get deeper into psychedelics and deeper into spirituality, awakening, etc., the lines between imagination and reality blur to the point of where it's almost like you realize everything is infinite imagination, because nothing can stop God / infinite consciousness from imagining anything, because quite literally it is unbound. Something appears from nothing, because nothing stops nothing from becoming something, ergo something comes about. And somehow it came about in this bloody northwestern environment for the Vivec nodal point of consciousness. So yeah, telepathy, is it real on psychedelics? I'd say it's real in the case of it being able to be experienced, whether you want to argue about the semantics of the word and etc., and the linguistic qualities of what real means. The only way I can prove telepathy to you is you either take my word for it and you do the research from other people's experiences and be like, oh yeah, well, this is probably a possibility, maybe I should try and explore it myself. The only real way for you to prove it is to experience it. And even then, some people will experience telepathy and they'll still probably deny it, like, it was just an illusion. And it's like, yeah, whatever, reality is a fucking illusion anyway, but it's so dense, the illusion is so dense that we get lost in it. But then the illusion gets sort of like surreal and trippier and more dreamlike when you start experiencing things beyond the normal constraints of being a chimp-like creature that can only use its hands and its mind. Then you can start using like meta mind to actually experience telepathy. I've experienced it, I bet many of you have experienced it, and it's 100% possible. Now, disclaimer, big disclaimer. When you experience telepathy for the first time, you might not actually be like, oh my god, this is absolutely amazing, I'm telepathically communicating with my best mate. It might literally completely shatter your reality. I was getting really cold sat down there. My god, it's freezing in England at the minute, I tell you what. So when you actually experience it for the first time, you might not enjoy it. I don't know, I'm circling around. I'm going to sit back down. What is wrong with me? When you experience it for the first time, it might really shatter your reality so much that you go into chaos mode, like you go into the chaotic ego death mode, where you're flaring around, you're pissing yourself, you're taking your clothes off and all this shit. So be very, very, very careful if you want to pursue this, because if you've never experienced anything that profoundly inhuman, it could really throw you off balance and chuck a wrench into the works of your solid relationship with reality. And it is a very fine line to walk. I don't think people on a even psychonauts, like some, like, I hate to say amateur, but like just novice psychonauts who are just sort of doing it for funsies and that, which is completely understandable. A lot of us started there. I did as well. So again, it's just me just analysing my own past through other people, and I notice I see myself, my past mistakes as a psychonaut, because they're not really mistakes, because I kept learning from them, and as long as you keep learning through mistakes, that's all good. But I see this in quite a lot of young psychonauts where, they don't realise just how profoundly deep the rabbit hole goes with the tele abilities, the telekinesis, the telepathy, the oneness, the infinitude, the radical states of consciousness that you can experience in psychedelics. And they have these ideas about, I'm like, oh, I'm really ready to do it. I'm going to take like this dose of mushrooms that I've read online. It's like, oh, this is the perfect dose for experiencing telepathy and things beyond the constraints of the monkey brain. And then when they actually experience, like, whoa, this is too much, I'm getting scared, and then the ego comes back into control mode, or it tries to control. It's like, no, I need to stay here, I'm not letting go just yet. And then that's what can produce some seriously disturbing traumatic experiences. So have your knowledge, have your consciousness, do your conceptualization, do your research, do all the theory, and then one day you might be able to go in for the actual practice of doing it. But don't seek it too much. Try and go beyond the egoic desire to be like, you might listen to this or hear about telepathy and be like, oh my god, I'd love to experience that, it'd be so cool. Like, it's not about the fun, it's about exploring the mind, exploring truth, exploring consciousness. And sometimes it can be too much to handle. It really has. You've got to be honest with yourself about what you're ready to experience. Again, broken record, but taking psychedelics and the spiritual path it's not a race. It's a very, very slow, steady walk that sometimes you might stumble over a little pebble or a rock and maybe even fall backwards, but you have to have the consciousness and the will to get yourself back on the path, or else you'll either just stand still or even or actually walk backwards. You need to always have consciousness to navigate the complexities of what's going on, including the possibilities of telepathy on psychedelics and heightened states of consciousness, which very much can be experienced even if you don't believe it's real, because, I mean, I cannot... there's no point even arguing about it. Like, this is why I don't argue with people really about stuff. I just like having discussions rather than debates, because I'm not really in the game like debating materialists and like staunch, logical, rational people, because we're just operating in two different realities. I can experience telepathy, you can't, or maybe you can but you haven't yet. It's like, what's the point of even arguing about it? I know that what I experienced, but I don't need to prove it to anybody. The only way I can prove it is by going and having a telepathic communication with all of you lot who don't believe it. That sounds like a lot of effort, and also I don't have the money to fly all around the world to meet all the Vivecians, as many people started calling themselves. I find it quite a funny little name. Anyway, if you want to talk more about the trippy nature of reality, please join the Discord and message me on Instagram. They're the best places to talk to me, and the Discord's the best place to talk with like-minded psychonauts. Awesome community we have there, and I hope you enjoyed the return of the Shed Talks. It's very much been a pleasure to get back into the swing of things. I'm still struggling with my internet at my new house, so I did want to get back on the daily uploads, but I don't get my internet properly till the 29th, so I'll just try and like drip feed you a bit of content until I can proper get back on the hamster wheel, the metaphysical one, because obviously the hamster wheel is imaginary. So anyway, hasta la vista, psychonauts, and take it easy.